Hello, welcome to my part 2 of my deconstruction of Stefan Molyneux' book, The Art of the Argument, Western Civilization's Last Stand. And in the last chapter, or in the last part, I took a stab at the first one or maybe two chapters, I'm not really sure. I think it was one chapter. It was sort of an introductory stance on what is an argument and so on, right? And the problem here was manifold. First of all, the whole start as such is so filled with sophistry. It's manipulative. It doesn't carry the reader into the argument. It just slams it in your face, and emotional manipulation and political agendas and all. Everything is just thrown at you like, there's no tomorrow, right? It's actually in the complete opposite end of the scale of how he tried to establish UPB in his UPB or ethics book, right? Where he basically slowly started out and then sort of arriving at a conclusion and so on, definitions and so on, right? At least to some extent, right? This feels like, okay, I have to have another approach. I'm just going to throw everything in the face of the reader in a half of a chapter, and almost like he's trying to what's it called? Bitch slap. It's like he wants to. He's trying to knock you out, so you're confused on the first pages but because you want to read on, you're sort of, okay, I'm going to accept this. It sounds kind of right. It sounds like it's philosophy and so on, right? So the average reader might, it also taps into their prejudice while he rails against prejudice, right? He is so prejudiced in these kinds of arguments, sophist arguments, mind you, right? Where he rails against prejudice, and it's basically just prejudice, everything, and it's so compressed and unexplained what he means by different terms and so on, that you have to reject this outright as not being philosophy. If you're into sophistry or political, speeches or anything like that, where somebody rails against the, like Don Quixote fighting the windmills or whatever it is, right? If you're into that, fine, then you are sort of in your element here, right? This is not philosophy. What he does is basically use philosophy as a kind of a blue stamping method of his prejudice and his agendas and his emotions and his whatever it is he wants to accomplish, right? And what I sense is basically that the first 10 years of his attempt at doing philosophy, he tried the beaten path of doing some kind of rigid philosophy, at least to some extent, right? And then he took off the gloves around 2016 when Donald Trump came to power, and then go all in on sophistry in an attempt to use that to convince people to be rallied or what's it called? Rebel roused, you could say, or I'm missing a good word. I'm sorry, but mobilize. That was the word. Because conservative people and libertarians, they sort of keep very much to themselves, right? While the revolutionaries are, out on the barricades, they are on the left, and they're very much more up in arms. So he's trying to get up in arms to fight these communists. So that's what the sense I get. This is philosophy is just a blue stamping tool to make it sound convincing and rigid and academic and sort of authoritarian or patronizing even, right? It's like he is the big guy here who has all the concepts of philosophy under his control, and he can just tell the little people how to act, right? There's a bit of that megalomania over it, right? Someone who just throws arguments at you in this fashion is trying to bitch slap you into submission, right? And that's why I'm sort of, okay, let me step back a bit and take a look at this, right? And because it's so sophist, it's actually difficult to sort of find something to pinpoint at. Luckily, you could say he's trying to do some sort of rigid philosophy or the pretense of it. So there are references you can go to, but huge parts of what I presented last time is just words thrown at you to manipulate you, right? I'm trying to push those away. Go back, and I had a good laugh halfway through the presentation. I had I'm sure it's not the last time I'm going to have a big laugh. I don't know, but I haven't read the book, right? I only skimmed the first part 4 years ago, and then let it wait until now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on what I find is important and not go take all of his sophistry and go through that. You can re-listen to the part and then do your own, duly diligent research on the text and my comments and so on, right? So the core thing here is establishing what is really meant about an argument and what does it entail and what is the meaning and how do we understand, how do we recognize it, and all this, right? And I have to just warn you that it's very, very difficult. I tried to do some systematic thinking and, what would my comment be to this and that, but there's so much compressed into this that I'm possibly going to forget it. And maybe I have to get back to it in another part. And I remembered something I should have said, but because there's so much to say about this, I forgot it, right? So I'm going to have to, let's see if I can get that window up. Yes, going to have to, I've made a little presentation here that sort of condenses it in so that you have some text to follow, right? Okay, so he says, basically, an argument is an attempt to convince another person, right? And I don't like that at all, right? Trying to convince is sophistry. He's focusing on convincing people. He's not focusing on what it is he's trying to convince people of. That might be that somewhere in what he's saying, right? It is. I would agree with that. But the overall takeaway is something like an argument is an attempt to convince another person of X, Y, and Z, right? So convincing is what he's focusing on, right? It's sort of a Freudian slip that tells you this guy is basically a sophist, right? He's trying to convince you of something that is different from what you believe already, not taking apparently overall into account that what he's convinced of must be scrutinized before he convinces anybody, right? And another thing is convincing is manipulative. I can't see it in any other way, right? If you present an argument, it should be the argument in itself that makes people realize, okay, if I made an argument about the same subject from my viewpoint or from my philosophy, it would be this way. But comparing to that other argument, I can see that's a better argument for the same thing. There's no convincing done in it, right? What's the convincing part of a syllogism? If I say all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. What is the convincing part of it, right? There actually isn't any convincing part of it, right? You have to add something else. you have to add some kind of sophistry to your reasoning skills, right? To convince people. It's the convincing part that I am sort of furious about, right? And he starts out by defining an argument by what it is aimed towards, not what it is, right? It's in an attempt. The purpose of the argument is to do this, to that, or the other, right? But that doesn't define what it, I mean, you can't define a bicycle, start by, if you say, okay, we're going to talk about bicycles. Bicycles are used to transport yourself to the grocery store or whatever, right? That would be kind of weird way to start a discussion about what bicycles are, right? So he's very focused on the use of arguments rather than what they are and how they are built and so on. He does do that, and I'm going to comment on that also. But it's just, you know, a pointer to you about what he's trying to do, right? You have to read between the lines with sophists. You can't take it literally. You have to deconstruct it like I do here, right? And then don't stay within the bubble of sophistry. Disconnect yourself a little. I'm just trying to, this is how I do it, right? Disconnect yourself, try to take a similar situation somewhere else that is sort of disconnected from what he's talking about, and apply the same thing. And I'm going to present sort of an exercise afterwards that's sort of a tongue-in-cheek to some extent, maybe. Oh, no, not tongue-in-cheek. It's as valid as any other argument, but I'm trying to turn the guns at Stefan Molyneux instead of him pointing them at me, right? His sophist gun, right? I'm doing some anti-sophistry, right? Okay, so an argument is attempt to convince another person of 1, the truth, or 2, value. So you have to convince people of truth, in his opinion. His understanding of what an argument is that he has, if he's the one arguing, he has truth, and he's trying to convince you of the truth that he has, right? This is a missionary man, right? He's not going to accept that you are actually able to understand truth or have truth. He has truth, and he has to convince you about truth. And even worse is his idea that the second part is value. Value is purely subjective, right? Truth can become objective in the sense that if I point and say that's an elephant, you're standing beside me and say that's true, then we have a kind of objectivity about that object. We both claim to be true when we refer to that proposition I just made, and the fact is elephant, right? That we can agree on. But that's a nice elephant, for instance. I like that. That's valuable elephant to me. That's purely subjective, right? You can make the argument and say that's a nice elephant, but we can't agree upon it, right? It's if you're standing beside me and saying I agree that's a nice elephant, it's not the same thing we are agreeing on. We are just referencing something in ourselves that might be similar, but we are not referring to anything that is empirical, right? It's not empirical. The attribute of niceness comes from the inside, right? But the sense data arriving from the outside, let's call it that, which is elephant, ignites the same concept apparently in both of us, and that's why we say it's true. But it's both of those arrive from external sense data, let's say, right? While value is something that comes from the inside of you, that you add to the same object that you just made a truth claim about, right? So you have to have truth before you can make value. So he makes a distinction between truth and value, but value is dependent on truth or objectivity, right? if we are going into an argument. You're not arguing with yourself. You must be arguing with somebody else. So you're trying to establish some objectivity around it, right? Value can never be objective. It's absolutely freaking impossible. It can never be, right? Objects can be objective if we agree about it, but we have to accept or show the respect for another individual that says that's false if you say that's an elephant, right? Who are you to dominate your truth on others and try to convince them about your truth? That's what missionary people did, and they ended up, cutting arms and legs of people, like in Belgian Congo 130 years ago, right? Because they didn't have the right understanding of truth and values and all, right? This is the fucking problem. This is the basic problem of why things go wrong in the world, because people don't accept contrary ideas of what is true and what is valuable. You have to accept the subjective parts of people's understanding, right? You have to show some respect. You're going around and saying, basically, I have the truth and I have the values, and I'm going to fucking convince you that I'm right. Well, who can you think of in the 20th century who had this notion, right? The communist, the fascist, the totalitarian, I am right about my values. I know the truth. You have to submit to me, or you are an edgelord, and you have to be put into an asylum or a concentration camp or the gulags or whatever it was, right? This is the first step into authoritarianism. I'm sorry, but I have to clarify, this is what is going on, right? Even if Stefan Molyneux does not realize this is what it is. It's just, and these are one of the reasons why he's being labeled as a sort of a modern day Hitler, or all these. And you could, in a broader spectrum, if you have to step slightly into a philosophical side of politics, is that there's some truth in saying that the progressives constantly challenge whatever ideas are the reactionary part of society. I want the foundations, the laws, and the rule of law, and we have to conserve this to make sure that nothing happens. And then the progressives try to challenge this all the time. And at some point when the conservatives or the reactionary, or whatever you want to call that if you are grouping people this way, which I don't like normally, right? But to refer to what he's saying, what happens is when there's a lashback from the conservatively or reactionarily minded people, they get into complete totalitarianism, which would be something like Nazis, right? The progressives are the communists, and the fascistic or are the conservatives, who have a lashback against these progressive challengers who wants to challenge everything, or sex and families, and I'm not saying any one of them are valid. They are pretty crazy, every one of them, right? If not all out completely crazy, right? So what he's trying to do is, okay, he senses that the progressives are taking over everything, and that's basically the case, I would say, right? Or all those who silently support by just following along, all those who support welfare state, destruction of everything, right? But that doesn't mean that philosophy is about, rebel-rousing reactionaries into fighting against. So it's only going to make things worse, in my opinion, right? And you can see that with, all these, when Trump was, then there's a fake elections, and there are false flag, extreme right, in Congress or whatever it was, right? It gets worse and worse and worse, right? So, and he's being sidetracked by the progressives, right? Of course, He's a very he got his 15 minutes of fame between 1917 and 1919 or 20 or whatever it was, and then he's just pushed out on the side, right? So he's actually in a worse place than before he attempted this sort of philosophical political coup of some kind, right? So he's more sidetracked and more obscure now than he was when he was actually pretending to do real philosophy, right? So it's stupid, right? And it's sort of a sign of megalomania. So, okay. An argument is an attempt to convince another person of truth or value of your position using only reason and evidence. So I'm not crazy about this, right? It rests on the understanding of what the definitions or how he defines position and reason and evidence and value and truth and attempting and convincing and truth and reason, evidence, position, all these terms that I write there, the definitions of terms. What does it mean? And when it's not presented, the reader is inevitably going to add his own or her own understandings of these things, and then he might get away with his sophistry exactly because he does not define the terms he used in the definitions, right? In the broader definition of an argument. But deconstructing that definition means that it rests on a base of 7 or 8 or 9 other terms that are not defined. So he's sort of defining something based on a subjective understanding of attempt, convince, and he has to make some sort of coherent understanding of what he means when he says convince and truth and value and so on, right? Okay, so when we are talking about the first one, truth arguments, according to his writings, right? And I've condensed it and rearranged it a bit so it makes better sense in my head, right? So truth arguments aim to unite fragmented subjective humanity under the challenging banner of actual reality. And why are the aims important? Right? It's if you're talking about how to make a bicycle and the definition of what a bicycle is, you're talking about, okay, you could ride a bike into the woods, or you could ride a bike up a mountain, or you could use it to make a windmill, or I don't care about that, right? The purpose of this, or the aim, or what you can use it for, is not relevant to understanding what it is. This is sophist, like nothing. It's so sophist, right? He's trying to lure you into an emotional state of, this is what we are going to, fight the devils with this tool of, arguments, right? And the second one is wage war against delusion, confirmation bias, endless emotional reaction. So, and then below that, he says, okay, by the way, truth can be divided into 2 kinds of reasoning, deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning, right? But first of all, you need to have these labels that are sophistry and emotional manipulation and prejudice and all sorts. That, by the way, I don't like prejudice is bad, but I'm going to prejudice you and, form you into an understanding of the aim and the purpose, and it is so important, right? And then he goes on to define deductive reason and inductive reasoning, right? And I'm not going to go into that. Or there are value arguments. And apparently they are the same kind of, they are within the same umbrella term of arguments. But deductive and inductive reasoning, why are they in the same category as value arguments? I just told you up here, well, that's my philosophy, right? But values cannot be based on anything, and their values are extracted by your rationality. When you have deduced or you have experienced something, right? You don't even need to deduce anything from it, right? If I experience elephant, all sorts of values appear in me that makes me rationalize about what to do. I don't have to make any deduction, right? I don't have to make any. I might make some inductive reasoning, right? I may say, okay, because there's an elephant, I rationalize that I might in the future I might run that way, right? That's sort of inductive reasoning, right? There's nothing that says that because there's an elephant, I have to run in that direction. I have to subjectively figure out what to do. Nobody can tell me what to do, right? Value arguments aim at, again, that's the aim. This is what they aim at doing. Why is that important, right? Oh, you have to understand what we can do with them rather than what they are. It's more important what I'm going to do with these arguments. I'm going to, change the world with arguments. Improvements in aesthetic or moral standards. Okay, so if I make a value, I'm saying that's a nice elephant or anything similar. Maybe you could find a better value statement, right? That's a valuable elephant. That's a valuable horse, right? That's a nice horse. That's a great horse, right? I like my horse or something like that. Okay, what does that improve in aesthetic or moral standards? What are these aesthetic and moral standards? What the hell are you referring to? Right? What the hell are these standards? You can't just mention some standards and then say we are improving the standards by making these sounds with our mouth, which is the sound that's a nice elephant. These sounds doesn't necessarily improve anything, right? I mean, holy shit. And examples are, we should really buy this picture, not that picture. So that's a claim. Why? Well, who are you to tell me what picture to buy and not? What is this? Let's go to this movie rather than that movie. But why is that valuable? If it's not valuable to me, I would say, no, I want to go to this movie, not that movie, right? So yes, it's about, but they are personal, subjective values, right? If I want to go to that movie and you want to go to that movie, right? How do you improve the moral standards by arguing about these movies? I want to go to that movie, you want to go to that movie. How do we solve that problem, right? It's not like, yeah, but then you're going to say, yeah, but I think this is a better movie, so you should go over and watch this movie. Are you improving my moral standards by telling me what movie I should watch? Is that what you are attempting? But because then you think you are better than everyone else. I have access to what is objectively the best movie to watch in this situation. You should follow my lead, right? Bullshit, right? Okay. The human mind is elevated by exposure to beauty, not ugliness. Okay, so this is again, right? Some people think that, if you go back to the 1890s and you were in Provence and you met Vincent van Gogh and you saw his painting, you would probably say, what an ugly painting. You're not painting it the right way, and these people are too small, and that tree is the wrong color, and everything. But to me, Vincent van Gogh is just about the most inspiring kind of painting you can you can watch, right? It's such an interesting way of accessing another person's artistic expression. When you look at a picture by Van Gogh, it's like you're entering into another person's mind, right? A personal mind where you're welcome. You're not being told anything. You're just welcome into his sort of slightly strange but very accommodating, slightly naive world, so to say, right? But is that beauty or is it ugliness? Well, in any case, it's purely subjective, right? Because you are the one having the emotion of beauty or ugliness, right? And you can't say, okay, because I have that emotion, that object over there is beautiful. You can say, I think it's beautiful, right? That would be possibly true to you. I can't know it because I don't have your emotions, right? We can agree upon the object, but we can't agree upon whether or not it's beautiful and ugly. And another part is that beauty and ugliness, is a matter of degree. And in my philosophy, nothing that is a matter of degree can possibly be agreed upon, right? You can approach each other, right? Those who like Van Gogh can get together in a club or something and say we are the persons who really like Van Gogh, but there's no objectivity to it. There's no reference to reality. Ugliness or beauty is purely subjective, right? And you have to accept that. So this whole value argument is bullshit. You can't improve aesthetic or moral standards because it's purely subjective, right? And what are these standards anyway, right? Definitions of terms again, right? What is fragmented? What is subjective? What is humanity? What is reality? What is delusion or confirmation bias? Confirmation bias may be something that is pretty much settled, right? It's sort of a fallacy. Prejudice, fact, improvement, aesthetic, or moral standards. Now, I have put some of these in capitals, like subjective. These are the ones that that would be something that would be nice to have defined, but they're also something that needs to be defined for this to be any kind of rigid philosophy, right? Like subjective and its opponent, which is objective, right? What is reality? The metaphysics, right? A fact is epistemology, right? Moral standards, morality, that is ethics, right? These things has to be settled before you use them. You have to have something. You can't take these huge 3 important pillars of philosophy and just pretend that everybody knows what it is, because it has never been settled, right? And you haven't settled it, right? Even if you think you have settled up here, there were very important things like truth, value, reason, and evidence, in my opinion. These are important things that needs to be settled before you can use them in arguing for a definition or something, right? So, okay. Of the one up here, there's some other, I forget, further clarification from his side about what these are about. Truth argument can tell us who killed someone. Okay, so would you please extend a truth argument about JFK? I would love that. That would be interesting, right? Could you please make a truth argument about who killed JFK? Okay. It cares nothing about consequence. Okay, so you're telling me what truth argument is not about. That might be valid if you think people would think that consequences are interesting for truth argument. But why are you trying to create consequences by telling everybody what's the aim of the argument is? Because the aim must be some kind of creation of consequences, right? Waging a war, that's a consequence, right? Uniting fragmented subjective humanity, that's a consequence. And then down here you say, well, it cares nothing for consequences. What kind of fucking freaking stupid sophistry is this? I mean, do you read what you write? Has nobody pointing anything out about this mumbo jumbo of word salad, right? I mean, are there nobody in your fantastic circle of philosophy friends who can help you doing philosophy? Or are you the only one? You are the big spider sitting in the middle of everything in a singularity of philosophy, and everybody who comes to criticize you are out to kill you. Get out of my web, my spider's web, my philosophy spider's web, right? You are sitting in an echo chamber circle jerking your own megalomania into thinking you are creating arguments about arguments. Oh, God damn it, man. Oh. Okay, a truth argument can establish whether arsenic is present in a drink. No, an argument, saying that is the same as saying, I'm going to make some sounds towards this glass, and then I will, establish whether or not there's arsenic in the drink. Okay, I'm making a truth argument here. So listen carefully. You will understand, if you were sitting beside me, you will understand whether or not there's arsenic in this glass of water, right? There's arsenic. I feel stupid, okay. Oh, but it's good fun, right? There's arsenic in the water. See, now you know if there's arsenic in this water. I made a truth argument, right? There's arsenic in the water. Okay? Get it? No. I have to change it because I'm thirsty. There's no arsenic in the water. Okay, so now I can drink it. I made a truth statement, so there's no arsenic in the water, so I can drink it. No, just kidding. Holy shit, this is bullshit, right? Holy fucking shit, this is bullshit. And truth argument is the court, a court drama, right? Picture yourself in a courtroom, right? And then somebody says, there's arsenic in the water. So everybody knows it now, right? In the courtroom. Okay, everything is settled. There is arsenic in the water. We can go home now. Everything is cleared. Value arguments tells us murder is wrong. Oh, murder is wrong. Okay, so if I say to you, like a value argument, murder's wrong. So you're being told that murder is wrong. Okay, this is completely similar to saying, this red apple. I have an old postcard here, right? Can you see there's it's a picture of a waterfall, right? Okay, so if I say to you, there's blueness on this postcard, right? The postcard which has blueness on it has blueness on it, right? That is his kind of value arguments, right? Now I know that referring to blue is not the same as referring to wrongness, right? But it's similar. It's attempting to do the same thing while doing it with values, right? He's trying to extract his subjective value into reality and saying, I can point to immorality over there. Not only is that a nice horse, that is a moral horse, right? Something like that, right? But he's using a linguistic trick. If I called this blue postcard a bubble up card, right? I said bubble up card is blue. It sounds like I'm saying something, but the definition of bubble up card is this postcard has blueness. And when I make that statement, I'm basically saying this card that has blueness has blueness. So I'm not saying anything, right? I'm just repeating the structure of the argument, taking a part of the structure out and then comparing to the structure and saying, this blueness I have out here is the same blueness as the blueness has on the postcard, right? So this linguistic trick is actually the foundation of his moral theory or his moral standard in his book of ethics. This linguistic trick is the foundation of how he claims to have found ethics or a moral principle. You see how stupid it is, right? Yes, murder is wrong because a murder is a wrong killing, right? That's why it's defined as being wrong. So when you're saying it's wrong, you're not saying anything else than just pointing out that that word has wrongness to it. But by using that linguistic trick, people think that you're referring something in reality by saying murder is wrong. Or you are implicitly saying that you can observe wrongness in reality, which was something that David Hume pointed out. You cannot, without making a connection between that object you experience and that wrongness you claim is there. You want to get to some kind of objective wrongness so you can tell everybody that is wrong and that is wrong and that is wrong and that is wrong, right? You just can't bridge the gap. You have to show how you bridge that gap. That's why Hume is so important for ethicists, because they have to bridge that gap. So just saying it can tell us murder is wrong. The whole of his book, his fallacious book, is in that statement: tell us murder is wrong. I mean, yeah, if he had proven it, but he hasn't. Go listen to my deconstruction of UBB, which is a 15-part series that is more than 10 hours long, where I go into every little nook and cranny of this piece of garbage ethics, right? He doesn't prove anything, right? Because he can't prove it the way he does it. Okay. Murder is the law. Okay, now he wants to cuddle up to statism, right? Law is something that those guys in the state create, right? They say, this is the law. If you disobey, you're wrong, and we can use violence against you, right? We are the lawmakers. You can't make laws. We can make laws because you told us we can make laws. But you've given away your right to make laws to us because we are so, magnificent, right? Okay, so this comparison to law is, I can tell you how manipulative it is. It's sort of trying to bridge morality with statism, right? It's combining statism or validating statism as being reasonable to enforce morality, right? Isn't that exactly what philosophers do not want, right? Or decent unsophistic philosophers want. They want to disconnect violence from enforcing morality, right? It's kind of scary, this kind of sophistry, right? It cannot be defined by consequences, but cannot be indifferent either. But what the hell does that mean? It cannot be defined, but it can't be indifferent. But can an argument be indifferent? Isn't it not the person who made the argument that can be indifferent? An argument can't be anything, right? It's just sounds. So are you saying that the person putting forth the argument cannot be indifferent to the consequences, but it cannot be defined by consequences? So how does this work? I mean, how does this work in your mind? I do not understand it, right? It's fucking scary. Value arguments can convince you not to serve arsenic to someone. Okay. So I'm having a glass of arsenic here, and I'm inviting people in, and I have a glass of my arsenic, and then somebody can say, I'm going to make a value argument now. I'm making this argument, and that would convince you not to serve arsenic to someone, right? Any of us, even maybe including myself, right? Is that how the world works? I mean, is it? Maybe you have you are thinking of something, but what you are writing is not conforming to what you think, possibly. And if you're thinking this, it's kind of weird, because that's not how reality works, in my opinion, right? Okay, so then again, there's a killing and murder and consequence, established, court, and law. What are these things? What are they? Right? Okay, so I'm going to present a little exercise for you here, right? We are talking about arguments, and just think about, use your critical thinking skills, which he leans up against that this is a lack in modern world, that children are not taught critical thinking skills. Okay, so are these statements I've made here, are they value arguments? Are they truth arguments? Are they a third kind of arguments we haven't dealt with yet? Am I using reason and evidence? And how would I, So it's just a little, thought experiment, right? Okay, I'm talking about what things I have to say about Stefan Molyneux as a person, right? So I'm trying to make some kind of argument here. Okay, Stefan Molyneux, he was a son of a mentally ill, psychopathic single mother. His father did not give a crap about him. So his mother basically chose a father that wouldn't give a crap about their children, right? Stefan Molyneux, was beaten and emotionally manipulated regularly by his mother and his brother until he was in his teens, possibly creating lasting damages to his brain and emphatic abilities. He started out as a communist, quote, maybe socialist, in his teens. He started reading philosophy, Ayn Rand, and he was enlightened, and then switched to libertarianism in his late teens. He was a womanizer, using his looks to get puniti, which is, you can look it up. He did not start out by studying philosophy, even if he was enlightened by Ayn Rand's philosophy. But he entered acting school instead, where you basically learn to do sophistry, pretending to be someone else, and use whatever argument you are handed. Then he quit acting. Did he start to study philosophy? No. He went looking for gold in the north. Then he entered university, not to study philosophy, but history, albeit apparently focusing on the history of philosophy. He was on the university debating team, which is the same as saying he is a brilliant sophist. He has several times later stated that he has the ability to argue any position well, whether or not he actually agrees with it. He finished university. Did he start to write philosophy then? No. He started a software business instead, becoming a sort of presenter of the product, among other, responsibilities, I suppose, right? But that is basically the free market version of a sophist. He did psychotherapy, I think that's what it's called, right? For extended amounts of time around this period, possibly creating a rejection of his philosophical limitations, and enforcing a kind of megalomania in him, necessary to have the balls to stand up for himself and his beliefs. He quit the business. Did he start to do philosophy? No. He started writing fiction books, a semi-sophist kind of approach to presenting arguments, and broad sweeping ideas like in Almost, which supposedly deals with a family and world history from the First to the Second World War. When the author ambitions failed, did he start to do philosophy? Yes, finally. When all else failed in the attempts of using sophistry, he needed to find a way to work from home in order to become a stay-at-home dad in the near future. So when YouTube started up, he saw an opportunity to attempt, So when YouTube started up, he saw an opportunity to attempt a philosophy channel, quote, philosophy, right? This succeeded, and by appealing to strict principles on rigid philosophy and rejection of gods and governments, and fous, which is family of origin, he established himself a kind of philosophical pendant to Jesus, the savior of humanity. Quote, or parenthesis, I personally remember him sitting in his car crying, telling the world that he was the only one who can save humanity, and he felt sort of being handed a torch from Socrates or something like that. It should ring a bell about megalomania. Later, he started to warm up to gods and governments breaking just about any principle he earlier seemed to adhere to. His book on ethics has not gained any traction outside his inner circle at all. It has sunk into obscurity, and the few who has attempted to argue with him about its shortcomings have been rejected by him and basically used as a sophist trick to attempt at justifying it. So these are arguments. You can have a little think about it, right? Are they value arguments? Are they truth arguments? Are they deductive reasoning? Are they inductive reasoning? And if they are none of these, and they're even another kind of arguments that he hasn't referred to, there is something lacking in his categorization of arguments, because he seems to be encompassing all possible arguments, right? So, okay, 50 minutes. We are at the 50 minutes mark. Okay, let's head into, I'm going back to finding his book here, right? So the next chapter is correlation and causation. Of course, the fact that atheists tend to be leftists does not necessarily mean that atheism causes leftism in politics. The causality could go the other way, that leftism in politics causes atheism, or there could be some other causality that affects both. Perhaps a belief in Darwinian evolution triggers both leftism and atheism. Parenthesis, since the poor are denied rewards in heaven, we must give them the money here on earth. It is certainly possible to come up with theories to try to explain this kind of causality. Who says it's a causality? Well, now you're just sort of, what's they called? You're just accepting this as a valid argument. You don't even have the ability to scrutinize an argument. You are referring to some argument somebody else apparently made, and now you're just taking it for granted, and then you're sort of evaluating the argument. Shouldn't you check whether or not it is actually an argument? Okay. For instance, Christianity generally opposes massive government growth, since for Christians, free will is essentially for morality, and government coercion strips citizens of free will. Thus, if you want to increase the size and power of the state, Christianity generally stands in your way. Okay. Who gives a flying frick, right? Atheists also tend to prefer consequentialism or outcome-based moral standards. That which produces direct and immediate benefits in society is considered the good, the greatest good for the greatest number, and so on. These are not principled arguments, but pragmatic arguments. Okay, so now you're talking about principled arguments and pragmatic arguments. How do they fit into your recent categories of arguments? This is freaking annoying, right? Manipulating my brain with all these terms that sound so philosophical, and you just bring them in and use them as you see fit, right? The principal argument against the welfare state is that it violates property rights. Thou shalt not steal. The consequential argument for the welfare state is that it immediately reduces the amount of poverty in society. If your goal is consequentialist, principled arguments often stand in your way. Religious morality tends to operate on abstract principles rather than material consequences, which is why there are the 10 Commandments rather than the 10 government policy proposals that rapidly alleviate particular suffering among targeted groups in society. Oh, this is so loaded with agenda and sophistry and manipulation. And there is a thin line of philosophy in there, right? But it's like having a healthy meal where there's a small piece of salad while the rest is Mars bars, right? You say, yes, it's healthy because there's salad in it. Yes, but 99% of it is Mars bars, right? So it's not a healthy diet, this one. And I might want to add, okay, this cuddling up to Christianity is disgusting, right? Because it leaves everything out that you do not want to look at, right? The amount of suffering and human manipulation and destruction of human abilities that Christianity, or the idea of Christianity, is responsible for is so huge that it's uncountable. It's not, you can only say it's so huge, right? You can't even point to what the level of destruction it has created, not to think of all the politics and other religions and so on, right? And another thing I want to point out is, right, and that's this. Russia was very Christian. Christianity and the state or the king was basically, synonymous, right? They evolved into communism, right? Italy was Christian, is still very Christian, is the home world of Christianity, right? Rome and the Vatican and so on. It turned out to become fascistic, right? What about Spain? Huh? They are Catholic, just like Italy, right? Basically, in an overall sense, right? What did they become? They become fascistic. Germany has a tradition of being quite Catholic, but also Protestant. It's the home world of Protestantism, right? But still very religious, at least to some extent, right? How did they turn out? They became fascistic. So it seems to me, at least, right, that religion is the fertile soil for growing into totalitarianism, right? Because the mental structure or the mental picture that is present, I believe, in religious people is a very strict totalitarian ideal that you are a little speck of a insignificant piece of shit just being wiped around by the great God universe, right? You are so insignificant compared to this greatness. You're just sort of, and that turns into becoming totalitarianism, right? Why don't you go down that route? No, because you need to mobilize, right? You need to mobilize the Christians, right? The last bastion of, morality. There might be some truth in it, but there might be some correctness to that. There are quite a few Christians who push back against government intervention. But how did governments arrive within something that was very Christian, right? How did that arrive? If it's so much against political influence and government and domination and, welfare, how did all this fucking welfare grow out of Christian societies? Answer me that, Batman, right? It's so ridiculous. They're not pushing back. They are the reason why we have this shit, right? Okay. Atheism may be promoted by those wanting to increase state power, since it removes the obstacle of Christianity. One example of this would be communism. If one goal of atheism is an ideology is to expand state power, then we would expect atheists who generally claim to be scientific to reject scientific or moral claims that reduce state power. When talking to atheists about global warming skepticism, racial differences in intelligence, or cutting government funding for science, I have found that most are quite hostile to such arguments. Yeah, but they are all in a sophistly created idea of that using violence to get what you want is okay. So as soon as you, when they can talk about being, on the free market and, making contracts and so on, right? Then they do that. But when you get to talk about the state, they suddenly switch over to be, you have to do as you're told, right? It's this cognitive dissonance. And it's just how people have been manipulated by other sophists, right? Throughout their life. Most importantly, their parents, who has either indirectly accepted that they will be exposed to sophistry or actually being sophist towards them. And that one of those sophistries are the gaslighting of religion, right? Gaslighting you into, submitting yourself to this destructive mental, disease. Okay. People often reject a claim of association by chanting the mantra that correlation does not equal causation. However, if you review the syllogisms above regarding atheist leftism, you will note that no causation is stated. If you do not make an argument for causation, your argument cannot be rejected for failing to prove causation. I would agree, but it's interesting that correlation and causation, if he's going to tell us about that, that would be interesting. I have my doubts that he's going to fall into the right basket, but let's see. Okay, and I might point out, I haven't read this before, and I guess you have to trust me on that, right? But I don't know what is coming next, so I'm taking this as a small adventure, so to say, right? And maybe that's a point worth spending a few minutes on. That this gives my reaction to it a more sort of live feel, a more real-time feeling, a direct response to something. And when you read something for the first time, you always get a lot more reactionary emotions or philosophical reactions than when you read it the next time or the third time or the fourth time, right? Then they have been, so the first time you read something, that's where you get the real gut reaction to something, right? And these gut reactions might be subdued later when you read it again and you have sort of philosophized and rationalized and reasoned about it, right? So I like that kind of approach. Okay, let's see what happens. However, it often will be the difference between logical and true. Well, what? But you talked about causation and correlation. Am I missing something here? Let's take it again. People often reject a claim of association by chanting the mantra that correlation does not equal causation. A correlation never equals causation, right? In fact, David Hume challenged the whole sort of ingrown idea of causation because he's an empiricist. If you're referring to causation as objective, you have to be able to experience causation. Well, then Hume would say, okay, what impression do you have of that causation? Or I would say, what is the sense data, right? Does it have a color causation? Does it have a feel? Does it have a taste? Does it have a sound? Right? These five senses, does causation have any of these? No. Then you cannot refer to causation as being empirical. It has to be some kind of mental structure that you apply to your reality. Okay. However, if you review the syllogisms above, and I'm reading on, right, above regarding atheist leftism, you will note that no causation is stated. If you do not make an argument for causation, your argument cannot be rejected for failing to prove causation. If you do not make an argument for causation, your argument cannot be rejected for failing. No, I guess not. If you're not talking about apples, you cannot be rejected for making wrong claims about apples. It's something like that, right? Okay. But then the next page is, however, it often will be the difference between logical and true. I mean, how does he Maybe there's a page or two missing in this book. I can't rule that out. But if it's not the case, how does he jump from talking about correlation and causation to logical and true? I don't get it. I mean, he's all over the place, right? Okay, this is about an hour long. I think this is the last bit of part 2. And next time I will be going through the next part, which is the difference between logical and true. And let's see how that turns out. Have a nice day. See you next time.